Hello, Sarah Jane Critchley here, author of A Different Joy, The Parent's Guide to Living Better with Autism, Dyslexia, ADHD and more. Now, today I wanted to talk to you about how you can help your young person understand other people better. Now, this isn't social skills, this isn't trying to change them into somebody they're not. It's around trying to make interactions with other people less scary. And if they're less scary, then people become easier to understand and it becomes more fun to be with them. And then you can naturally learn some more of those social skills in a less threatening way. But unless you understand how people behave and why they do what they do, it can be a terrifying thing to actually enter a social environment and know how to behave. I was talking to my other half about this, my husband. He actually described it as kind of like learning to play a piano. It's something we can learn to do, but it's not who we are. So it takes a lot of effort, it takes years of practice, but it doesn't actually change who you are as a person. It's a skill that you can learn, and it's a really, really useful life skill to have. So, how can you help your young people to do this? Well, we've had some success over the years, and it's getting easier and easier, and that's the wonderful thing. The first thing we did, over and over again, every single opportunity, is living life out loud. So at home, right from when they were really, really teeny tiny people, I would talk to them and explain what was going on. Little did I know how vital that was going to be. And so as they've got older, that becomes far more finessed because they have actually very good comprehension skills. I'm lucky in that way. But they are able to analyse and put into practice the things that they've learned and to discuss what has happened. So if something happens and there's an incident, we might actually sit down and say, oh, this happened, and that was really frustrating. And then we'd analyse what had happened, why it had happened, and how you might do it differently next time. Because every single interaction is a learning opportunity. And what I would do is I'd try and say, I'd explain my emotional temperature around things that are happening to make explicit that implicit knowledge of what's happening in my body and how I'm behaving. So if I'm really grumpy and fed up because I'm hungry, which is something that my children wouldn't necessarily identify, I'd say, look, don't even bother talking to me until I've eaten something, because I know I'm hungry and I know I get really bad tempered until I've eaten something. So that kind of went on for ages, and they would slowly learn not to approach me until I've been fed, because you wouldn't like me when I'm hangry. Being hangry is not a good thing. But then that progresses into actually understanding that if they are feeling cross and grumpy and unhappy, or their energy is dipped, that their internal temperature might also be affected by the same things they are seeing in me. So I would ask them and say, you look a bit grumpy. Have you had anything to eat today? And they say, oh no, I haven't. So, well, maybe that's why you have no energy and why you're getting really grumpy, and maybe start from there. So very, very basic things. Live life out loud, explain everything, especially where you think there might be a vulnerability. So we do it all the time with adverts. Adverts are brilliant because it's really useful to decode and laugh at the things that the advertising industry wants you to believe, because they're often not the case. But getting them to watch and decode the behaviour, the physical movement, what people say. So all those wonderful perfume ads that are out at the moment, because it's coming up to Mother's Day, it's kind of, oh, you want your mother to feel free because she's actually using this perfume. Well, that's a load of balderdash, frankly. But they understand that now because we have decoded those adverts. So they won't be vulnerable to manipulation in the same way, because that's been part of what we've talked about for years, over and over and over again. Different adverts, different scenarios, taking the very specific and generalising it from one example to several, hundreds, and over the course of a lifetime that gets more and more and more. Really, really useful skill to have. The second thing that we do, I've got 4 ideas for you, this is number 2, is around drama. So in our case, for child number 2, he was never keen to go and join a drama group or anything like that, but had ended up getting into musicals. And he performed brilliantly in Les Mis and the school production. It's fantastic. Didn't have a major role, but he was really good, and he did it in a really committed way. And he understood, as part of the process of learning that, he was taught how your body moves when you feel a certain emotion. Now that is really, really useful skill to have. So he's then decoding the physicality that he both feels and the way that it moves, and how other people perceive and react to that. So he then decided that he was quite happy to do GCSE drama, and so we said, yes, fantastic, do it. Not because we think the qualification is important to him at all. It's really, really not about that. It's around him learning how to understand, interpret and respond differently to people, and to feel that in his physical body in a way that gives him a better, more finessed physical, verbal and experiential language to use. Really, really useful. Now, I'm very, very aware that that is not going to work for every autistic young person. Not everybody is going to have that level of analytical skills. Not everyone is going to be able to express themselves in the same way. However, you can use other things like films. And I was very, very struck when I was at the National Autistic Society conference this week by presentations from a young man who was featured in Life Animated, which actually won awards. And what happened is that the parents who were concerned about this young man who was autistic and who was having trouble expressing himself and had no language, but he kept repeating bits of films. So technically they call it echolalia. That's the phrase that you might hear professionals using. But what it means is repeating a word or a phrase. But what he was doing is he was using that word or phrase to mean something. So it wasn't just repeating the words with no meaning, it was sharing the meaning of those words and using that particular piece of information to express a way that he felt. And he did it in clips and snippets of Disney films. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. And so the characters that each of those Disney clips expressed and what they were going with, he used that as a way of expressing how he felt and how he behaved and how he thought. And over time his vocabulary using those clips has grown and grown and grown and grown, and it gave them a way to interact with him and to understand, and for the adults around him to understand what he was thinking and feeling. Absolutely beautiful. I highly recommend it. Life Animated. Go and have a look for it. The fourth idea we had, which actually came out quite naturally, was that the boy wanted to do some Dungeons and Dragons. So he did some tabletop gaming. His two favourites are Shadowrun and Pathfinder. And I was talking to him about this morning because he's actually now running international tabletop games on Discord. It's a fantastic thing for him to be doing. And there's been a progression of this. So initially, a wonderful thing happened. He liked Dungeons and Dragons. He liked the fantasy aspects. He liked the Lord of the Ringsiness about it, and went to his school, and they were fantastic. And they said, yes, okay, we'll help you set up a club. So they helped him set up this club. And then with a group of his friends, he then started being the dungeon master. Now what that requires of him is for him to plan an adventure that the characters that they develop, each of his friends had developed, will work through and create a story between the group of them. So it's a group activity. It requires them to create characters. The characters have to behave in a way that's consistent with their abilities and characterisation. And then they go on an adventure and things happen to them and they have to respond both individually and as a group. So he's been doing this now for, he's been doing it for nearly 5 years. And over that period, he's not only done that with his friendship group, which is great, because that gave him a group of friends that protected him at school, but he's also now done that with a group of strangers online in an environment that's safe, where they all have different cultural backgrounds, and they've had to negotiate all of that. And he's now happily running those, and it's absolutely brilliant. I asked him this morning, I said, because it seemed to me that as his experience and running those adventures and understanding how groups worked and how individuals worked, that he was getting into a lot less conflict at school. And he said, yes, that's absolutely the case. He said that's absolutely the case. And I said, well, would you recommend it for Aspies? Would you think it's a good thing for Aspies to do as a way to develop social understanding and their ability to function in social environments? He said, absolutely, I think it would be brilliant. And I said, and have you got any Aspie friends who are on your group? And he said, yes, I have. And he described one of his friends, a young man who he'd known from about the age of year 6 onwards, so for quite a while now. And he said this particular individual was originally a more outgoing, slightly aggressive and a bit more shouty version, a bit more shouty in his presentation and very forthright. Forthright's fine, shouty and aggressive less so. And he said over time what happens is that this individual has become calmer and has actually developed his social skills. So he's not only, my boy is not only developing his skills and his understanding, but he's also able to interpret and watch and monitor what this other young man's doing and to reflect on that himself. And I said, and so this feels like quite a sophisticated thing for you to be doing. And he told me, this makes me laugh, he'd actually managed to manipulate his group into behaving in a certain way so that at the end of the game that they finished last, it took them back to the beginning of a story that they had run 2 games previously, because he knew what that group and what those individuals would do. How brilliant is that in predicting behaviour? And he said it's just been brilliant. He said it's really, really good. So those are my top tips for today. 4 top tips for you, how to do social without a social skills programme. And it's around understanding, not changing. So really, really love that one. Give it a go. Let me know what works for you. I'd love to know if you've got any other ideas. Please drop them in the comments below. Talk to each other. Share what's worked for you. So go for it. Lovely to speak to you today. So Sarah J. Critchie coming out. I would like you to speak your truth, honour your struggles and live a happier life of your own choosing. Have a fantastic week. Speak to you next week. Bye.